I'm Hindol Sengupta. I have invited a good friend of mine, Kushal Mehra, a popular podcaster, political commentator, now also an author, and in whose honor, actually, instead of my more formal look, I've also donned a T-shirt. But while while that is in the lighter vein, the topic I want to discuss with Kushal is extremely serious. Kushal has a unique vantage point to a particular issue. He lives, because of his familial situation, partly in Canada and partly in India. And as an Indian who spends a large amount of the year in Canada, he has a particularly unique perspective on the Khalistan issue, which has really been stoked in the recent past in Canada. We are talking on a very interesting date. Today, of course, is the anniversary of the Kanishka bombing, the Kanishka jet of Air India, which was bombed by Khalistani terrorists. Remember, before 9/11, the Kanishka bombing was the single biggest act of aerial terror in the world. People don't seem to remember this near nowadays. It's important to underline this. And yet today, once again, we saw clamor by Khalistani separatists in Canada and other parts of the world with very nefarious ideas and means. I want to talk to Kushal about what he really sees in Canada from the ground and what his diaristic jottings about this you really are and what his understanding is. Kushal, welcome.
Hey, how are you doing, Hindol? First of all, thanks for having me over. Yesterday's event was quite interesting. So for those people who are not aware, um, uh, I just wanted to give them a brief idea about what it was about. Obviously, 39 years ago, on the day the horrific bombing, the Kanishka bombing of an Air India flight had happened, under which more than 300 Canadians, more than 300 human beings. I think there were some Indian citizens, and majority of them were Canadian citizens that had passed away. Um, the perpetrators of the crime are are still not convicted. There is an ongoing investigation, and I want to give you the exact quote of the police in Canada. I mean, it's just everything is grotesque about this, right? So our investigative efforts remain active and ongoing, said the police chief. I mean, we say justice delayed is justice denied. If ever there was a case for justice delayed is justice denied, is the case of what the Canadian authorities are doing in this case. So we went there to pay our respects to the victims. Some of the victims' families were there. The Indian Consul General was there. There were people from different organizations. It was so nice to see, Iranian Canadians turn up, Jewish Canadians turn up, Muslim Canadians turn up, Sikh Canadians turn up, Hindu Canadians turn up. There was a very good crowd for Canadian standards. You have to understand, Canada is a very sparsely populated country. So crowds in Canada, the measuring criteria cannot be compared to India. Like Canada's population is basically Mumbai metropolitan region and Delhi, not even NCR. That's the population of Canada. So we were there, and then to my utter horror, on the other side. So let's assume we are standing here, right? And then there is a police. There were at least 20, 25 cops there, and the just between us, and then on the other side, we were on the southern side of the lawns, and on the other side towards our north, there were around 30, 40 people with Khalistan written on the flag, and just to show how they are patriots or the real patriots, a couple of Canadian flags, and ironically one American flag. I did not understand why there was an American flag there, but there was one American flag, and they were basically spewing conspiracy theories, how this bombing was done by India. The Indian government was involved in this entire episode, and they were insulting the memory of the victims, of the families, and I have not, and not this. This has not just happened in Toronto. There is an independent investigative journalist. I don't know how to pronounce his name, so pardon me for that. It's spelled Mocha. I don't know if it's Mocha or Mocha. I don't know how to pronounce his name, but he was there in another city, and where again, uh, this was another one of those events where the Sikhs for Justice turn up, and they try to peddle the same grotesque message over there. And it's come to a point where how do you even have a conversation with a certain section of the Khalistan movement? Like, even Khalistanis, I call them low level zombie, mild zombie, and about to become a zombie. That's the three stages, I think, when you become a Khalistani. Where you're about to become a zombie, you start peddling with the idea of Khalistan. Then you become sympathetic to Khalistan, you become a mid-level zombie, and then you become this absolute grotesque human being. Is when you go to a commemoration event and you peddle this kind of nonsense. I have never seen something like this in my life. I mean, I've seen a lot of crazy things, but this was a new low even by Khalistani standards.
Kushal, there is a history to this, of course. For a long, long time, Khalistanis within Canada tried to push this idea that the bombing was done by somehow by the Indian government. When evidence after evidence consistently showed that long preparations were done to make this bombing happen, Khalistani terrorists were involved, all research that the and investigation that the Canadian government did pointed to that one fact that Khalistani terrorists had this bombing done. Finally, many politicians, including people who did not want to even say that it was done by Khalistanis, finally in recent years had begun to accept that. Now they're trying to push the needle back. And to the extent that, Hardeep Singh Nijjar, and I found it really astonishing, Kushal, that a man who had an Interpol bounty on his head, a man whose passport had been declined, a man who was known to be heading a terrorist front, the entire Canadian Parliament stood up for a moment's silence for Nijjar.
Following discussions among representatives of all parties in the House, I understand that there is an agreement to observe a moment of silence in memory of Hardeep Singh Nijjar, assassinated in Surrey, British Columbia, 1 year ago today. I now invite honourable members to rise.
Yeah, I mean, Canada is a joke. It's actually not even a serious country anymore. It used to be a very serious country. It's no longer a serious country. And the abysmal descendancy of Canada into an absolutely crazy, confused political system. I mean, what was the word Justin Trudeau had used? We are post national nation. We are a post nation or something. He had said, I mean, I don't even know. He's such a weird guy. Like, it's very weird to have a woke prime minister, right? I remember the incident where this girl had, addressed, she was a liberal. She was addressing Justin Trudeau and she's used the word mankind. The woke clown in chief of Canada says you should not say mankind, you should say people kind. I mean, what the hell is happening in Canada? The prime minister is is correcting people in his own addresses. So they talk about evidence, right? Sikhs for Justice turns up. Well, it's very interesting that the Sikhs for Justice are the same people who carry out photos of Talvinder Singh Parmar, who was literally the person who carried this out. They talk about all these things, right? Oh, they feel for the victims. They say, Parmar has nothing to do, but they ignore that, Parmar had picked up those tickets, checked in those bags, everything was done. Everything is documented, right? And Terry Milevsky's book documents it in great detail. Oh, Indian agents did it, but I don't know if anybody has bothered to look up the RCMP affidavit that Terry shared in his book. And the affidavit, I want to read it categorically. On the 9th of June, 1985, Source Court D advised Constable D. McLean and Constable T. Smith that members of the Malton Sikh Temple, Hamilton, Ontario, were told not to fly Air India as it would be unsafe to do so. These are all part of the official record and the official investigation. These are not things that we are making up, but such is the zombie land narrative now that you just keep, This is the Khalistani narrative. This is literally what they do. La 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 la. That's what they're doing now, and it has come down, and they think they're winning. They are, you know what they're doing? My biggest fear now is the the dislike for, because see, think like an average white person, Hindol. They don't understand who's a Khalistani, who's a normal Sikh. They truly don't understand that. Angus Reid does Mood of the Nation surveys in Canada year after year. They're the most known surveying agency of Canada. The dislike amongst average Canadians, including other faith systems of India that are Muslim, Christian, Hindu, all, the dislike for the Sikh community has risen to number 2 now. They are the most disliked community in Canada, as per Angus Reid and its polls, after Muslims now. This is not a good sign. And it is all because of this thuggishness. Brampton is a city. It's part of the Greater Ontario region. Car thefts have shot the roof there. Shot the roof. You have the highest car insurance rates in Brampton, Ontario today. I'm not making this up. Someone I know, this is a family friend. His car gets stolen. I think it was last year. And he had bought that car a month ago. He goes to the cops. The cops tell him, nothing's going to be done. He's like, what? He's like, nothing's going to be done. This is Brampton. Because the cops know by the time they catch, the cost of catching that perpetrator is so high. And what are we achieving with all of this? I don't understand. They have messed up the immigration. Canada is getting millions of people in and who are scamming the immigration system. Some of the universities and colleges over here, यहाँ पे वो colleges बोलते हैं ना, Hindol. If I take you to some of them, it is like an arcade, and it's there are 2 shops in it, and this is a college. This scam, now by the way, now just this year, they stopped that scam. So what they used to do is get all these people from Punjab. They are studying in this college, and they just go in. And then there is another unique mess in the Canadian political system, which I don't know many Indians know about, is that unlike the actual election, right, where you can only vote if you're a Canadian, in Canadian primaries, intra-party or inter-party elections, right, where you're fighting, let's say 5 candidates are fighting for that riding. The constituency ko ye log yahan pe riding bolte, they call it a riding. Anybody can vote. You and I can come on a tourist visa when there is a particular riding that is going to vote. You just have to give an address saying, I am Narayan Das Patwal, and just give some random address. They will not check it. You can go in and vote for the candidate you want to fight from that riding for that party. Yes, and the Khalistanis have hijacked it in such a beautiful way, Hindol. Kids are paid money. They are taken in trucks in every primary. They make sure every time a conservative Sikh candidate gets to fight an election, he's a by default Khalistani. A non-Khalistani Sikh just cannot win a primary because it's so rigged. They've rigged the entire system. This is what is happening.
And all of this, Kushal, when Sikhs make up what, 5% maybe, 6%, something roughly to that extent.
Oh no, not even that.
Not even
I don't
that.
think so. No,
Of the Canadian
they are
population.
less than Hindus. Like I said, absolute numbers may.
So it's a very small number of people, and not remember. And we have to remind ourselves and our audiences, of course, that not all Sikhs are Khalistan.
2%.
So it's 2%. So
Yeah.
out of the 2%, maybe whatever X number are Khalistan.
No. Out of the 2%, 15 to 25% in the range are radicalized Khalistanis. The rest, listen, we had Sikhs in our side also yesterday, and they're just looking. One Sikh only told me. In Punjabi he said, "Oh, zombie hai gene." It's like, what do you do? They're zombies. He's like, how do I deal with them?
So essentially, we're really talking about a very small number of extremely well organized, extremely well-funded, nefarious people, isn't it?
Oh my goodness, it is insane. And if you look at the patterns, right, Hindol, one cannot ignore. You look at the arguing style. I don't know if you saw this recent, it's insane. So, two different politicians tweet the same message. They don't even change the text. Can you believe that? They don't even change the text. On recently, one was Tim Uppal and one was some other guy. How do we know that? They're clearly being told to tweet by Khalistanis. They just copy, paste, copy. They're that brazen, they don't care. Like somebody will call them out, they don't care.
Kushal, I want you to reflect a little bit about what's happening to all the rest of the people. And you alluded to that when you talked about the survey a few minutes ago. Talk to us about the rest of the population in Canada. How are they responding to things like this? There's an election coming up. Of course, we know that Justin Trudeau's government is, in a sense, propped up by Jagmeet Singh and his party, which has always been very, very favorable towards Khalistanis. And, some of the problem lies there. But there's a big election coming up, and all signs suggest that Justin Trudeau may not win that election. What is happening to the wider Canadian society at large? What is happening to the larger Asian society within Canada, the Indian society? How are all of these groups responding to what's going on when they see people? All of these things happen in Parliament, for instance. How do they respond to it?
So it's such a tragedy that, listen, Canada has actually, before people criticize it, I want to say this again. I've lived both in America and Canada. Per capita, the least racist society I've come across in my life is actually Canada. People have no idea. I don't even live in like a major city of Canada. I live in what would be called conservative hub. Only white people. I'm like the random brown guy they see, right? I have never faced an ounce of racism. I've been visiting this country for 20 plus years now. Never faced racism. Are there racists? Yes. Never faced it. Never. They're actually the nicest people. Like, we always say that who are the nicest Gora log? I always say the Canadians are the nicest Gora log I've come across. Like, you feel hostility in America at times, very rarely. Nothing compared to Europe. Europe is, way ahead in racism. Like even American Goras tell me they're like, we don't like to go to Europe at times because they're racist to us also. It's very it's so weird. They hear our accent and the thing changes. But Canada, for the first time, is my fear because of bad policy making after the horrific terrorist attack last year on Israel and all these rallies that have happened in Canada, in America. I don't know if you've seen the news of Jewish synagogues being attacked in schools and girls' schools being attacked, shot at in Canada. Students and Jewish students feeling unsafe on campuses. This has led to a very silent but significant backlash in what is the majority white population of Canada. They're silent because Canadian culture is very polite. It's not very confrontational. Like, how in America they will confront you. They're very confrontational. Americans, whether they like you or they dislike you, they'll let you know. Canadians, they never let you know. They hold it on here. But for the first time, I see immigration. Canada has been Canada is unique. Both the conservatives and the liberals. In fact, in Canada, the conservatives are the most pro-immigration people I've seen in my life. If you remember, Harper government was the most pro-immigration government in the entire Western world. But the conservatives have realized that Justin Trudeau, for his cheap vote bank politics, weaponized the immigration system. Hindol, you can't let 2 million, 1.5 million people in a country like Canada. So I'll give you an example. 10 years ago, let's say if you have a townhouse in Toronto or Greater Toronto, you're paying a rent of, say, let's say 800 to 1200, 1300. Today, you don't get it for less than 2500 to 3000. This is the bare minimum. It's ridiculous. Every day you will see white Canadians crying on camera. I can't afford anything. I even have a job. I can't afford anything. They've truly destroyed just for getting students in so that they can be radicalized in mosques and gurdwaras. And I say this with no shame whatsoever. I had a Sikh gentleman telling me I have stopped sending my kids to a gurdwara. That's a big thing coming from a Sikh, because everything in a Sikh's life revolves around a gurdwara. And I'm like, why? He's like, I don't want to send my kids to a madrasa. These are the exact words the Sikh gentleman used here in Greater Toronto when I had gone for an off the record meeting. He's like, I get so scared what they'll do to my own child in the gurdwara, and they will make him a radical pagal. This is so rampant. And the repercussions, and then add to that this massive influx of people from all parts of the world, including India. It is not going down well with the average Canadian. And you know what? I empathize with them. You just can't let people in hordes and expect no cascading effects for that. And and then you will have, random Indian students saying, I heard one student almost implying that after education, getting PR is my right. I started laughing. I was like, no, it is not. You've come here for their education. They are not obliged to give you any PR.
It occurs to me, Kushal, what you're describing is what has happened in many parts of the world. Sweden comes to mind, Sweden, exactly the same thing happened. Malmo and all of these places, Stockholm, used to be some of the safest and nicest places in the world. Today, there are gang wars on the streets of Malmo. Swedes cannot believe it. They did exactly the same thing, opened the doors, no checks and balances, no proper filtering, assuming that integration will just happen on its own. And of course, it didn't. Germany, the same problem. You saw the knifing incidents recently in Germany. France, against the same problem. What you're describing essentially is something that the Western world is going through. In Canada, it is further toxified by this entire Khalistan thing. And, sitting in other parts of the world, including in India, the Khalistanis are so well organized. It seems like, they're making a big splash. But as you're explaining, they're a very, very tiny number of the Canadian population. In fact, a small number even of the Indian population in Canada. It's just
Yeah.
that they're well organized. And of course, they control certain parties, like Jagmeet Singh's party. And of course, like you're saying, in boroughs where
More than
Sikhs
Jagmeet, they
can
control
win,
the Liberal Party.
only
And honestly,
Khalistanis are pushed forward. How is all of this? How is all of this going to play out, Kushal, in the election that's coming?
listen, if you go by polls, right? Poll after poll. Right now, the last poll that I saw that was showing numbers recently also was pretty clearly pointing out to only one direction, that if the elections are to happen, the Conservatives are going to cross the 41-42% voting mark, and they're going to win pretty much. And so this is they're at 42% federal vote intention, they call it. I mean, Polling Canada does these polls all the time. As far as control, right? The Khalistanis control all the parties, not just the Liberals and the NDP. When it comes to the Sikh issue, but with the Conservative Party, there is always pushback, and they course correct, they course correct, they course correct. So I'll give you an example. Yesterday in Toronto, right? You would expect politicians to turn up for a commemoration event, right, Hindol? But there was only a Conservative Party member there with a direct message from Pierre Poilievre. Every other political outfit of Canada did not even bother to come or send a representative on the commemoration event of arguably the most horrific terrorist event in the history of this nation. What does it say about the Liberals and the NDP? That they don't even care, that they don't even. This is like Joe Biden, Democrats, because they want the votes, because they are convinced that Muslims will not vote for me if 9/11 is, called a bad day. So they stop acknowledging 9/11. This is what they did yesterday. I was shocked. I thought there'll be the token liberal and the token NDP person over there. But now only the Conservative Party came and they
Why is
acknowledged.
this true, Kushal? Is it because the Khalistani Sikhs vote in a particularly organized fashion, whereas the wider population, especially perhaps the white population and the wider Indian population, do not vote in that manner. They're not organized, they're not strategic, but these people are, and they carry their votes to whatever their strategic interests are.
It's literally that. You've hit the nail on the head. And now it's changing. Other minorities are realizing this. It Hindol, what's happening to the Jews here in North America is very, very scary. Very, very scary. I say this again and again. And if not controlled, listen, there are barely a few lakh Jews in Canada. I have gone to Jewish gatherings where I was invited as a speaker now a couple of times. When you speak with them off the record, those people are really scared. They're scared. They're like, we don't know what to do. And Jews have never voted as a group. But let me tell you, this will be the first election where even the Canadian Jews will vote as a group. Canadian Hindus have never voted anything but liberal. They just 85% of Indian Hindus go and vote liberal. This will be the first election where Hindus are so scared because in the last 2 years, more than 7 to 12 incidents of vandalizing Hindu temples has happened. And everywhere there's graffiti of Khalistan, Murdabad, and nobody acknowledges it. Nothing happens. So they are so alert now that, listen, there is going to be a counter polarization. And the people who are responsible for this polarization are the liberal and the Jagmeet Singh. I have seen many grotesque politicians. I have a very low opinion of many politicians in India. Jagmeet Singh gets the gold, silver, bronze, and another medal in being the most third-rated politician I've come across in my life.
Kushal, I noticed, it's what you just said, that even the conservative leadership in Canada, while tweeting about the anniversary, did not even mention the Khalistan or the Khalistani word.
Yes.
Even the conservative leadership.
Yes. Which is why we need other... See, what happens is, this is how politics works over here. And I hope I'm able to pass this message on to Canadian Hindus if they watch this. Politics is a carrot and stick game. Every member of parliament works on which community has a nuisance value. Hindol, you don't need to be convinced about what I'm saying. We have seen enough politics in our life, both you and I, in the last 20 odd years, to know politicians only understand one thing: the language of votes or the language of notes. Here, the problem is these communities don't have any nuisance value. The Jews have no nuisance value here. The Hindus have no nuisance value here. The average white Canadian who's decent has no nuisance value here. The moment these people figure out that, oh my God, they have a nuisance value, is when the politics of Canada will change. My fear is that if this goes on for longer, the reaction will be so bad from the native white population that, they will not understand who's, like I said, they don't know who's the Sikh and who's the Khalistani. They will payload every Sikh. That's my fear. I don't want that to happen. Sikhs are my people. Why would I say that? The same thing is what's happening with the Muslim issue post-Palestine. There are so many good Muslims here. Why should they suffer? They will create an image of the average brown guy and boom, that's my biggest fear. It's already starting to happen in Europe.
I mean, exactly. I mean, I was just coming to that. I mean, this is exactly the sentiment in Europe, right? I mean, European politics this summer is transforming if you're left of center, you think it's devastating. If you're right of center, you of course are really rejoicing. But suffice it to say that European politics is dramatically changing this summer in many, many ways. And as it, in the future, as we go into a French election and so on and so forth, it'll change more. Interestingly, in France, because you mentioned Europe, there is now suggestion or suspicion that many of the Macron acolytes will finally become Le Pen acolytes when they smell power there, which of course happens in politics. Similar things might actually happen in Canada. And you're right. I mean, Jagmeet Singh is nobody's friend. I mean, it's a pity that the Canadian politicians perhaps don't understand it. But he's nobody's friend. I mean, and he's, we in India know people like that, right? People who are all pretense. I mean, that kind of pretension. I understand that in certain quarters of the prosperous Western world, they think of these things as genuine, but they are not. You and I know that's not true.
No, listen, the amount of naivete I find in this society when it comes to these things. Like, I'll give you an average political discussion over here. Oh, I don't like this MP. I'm going to vote this MP out. And in my brain is like, okay, I get it. But the other side has these policies. So like, but I don't like this MP. I'm like, no. But this is what they're doing. They are so fiercely individualistic here, right? The average Canadian. They don't understand group voting patterns. Their brain doesn't process it, because in the last 100 plus years, right, individualism is deeply ingrained in their DNA. So when small groups come here and they start voting in packs, and these guys, they're like, when did this happen?
Yeah, this is
They're
exactly
so
what's happened in the
stumped.
UK too. This is exactly what's happened in the UK. Yeah.
And it is, I often say this, it is my duty as a brown guy who lives in Canada to educate white folks about this pattern in certain sections of our communities. And this doesn't make me, an Uncle Tom. No. I'm a moral objectivist. I don't care if you're white, brown, yellow, black, whatever. If you talk garbage, I will correct you, white or black or brown. I don't care. I don't look at people. In fact, I can understand those white Canadians who are fiercely individualistic, because I'm like that. But I also get my culture, and I get what these people are. The Khalistanis and Islamists have gained the system so beautifully. If you were not a good human being and did not have a moral center, you'd actually start admiring what they're doing to the system. You'd be like, such a beautiful evil strategy. That's how evil they are. But I see good signs. So Hindol, in the last 3 years, especially, and I have to give the credit to the government of India here, since the government of India has started cancelling OCIs of Khalistanis, I have personally witnessed this. The average attendance of these Khalistani events has reduced by giant numbers, because they realized that when they put these videos online, right, all the Indian government was like, thank you. Kiska OCI hai? Cancel. Abhi they can't come. And the one thing, these people, they have giant investments in India, in Punjab. And when their investments are taken away, that's when they have a problem. So they have stopped coming to these events. And because of these people and their thuggishness, the counter reaction from an otherwise docile Hindu community, I mean, nobody's as docile as Hindus here. They're actually docile till the edge of being pathetic at times. Now Hindus turn up. They turn up four times more than what the Khalistanis. They're just fed up. They're truly, and not just your kind or my kind, first generation. Yesterday in the crowd, I had second generation Canadians. Third generation Canadian was there. They're like, what the hell is happening here? I don't even understand. This is not the country I grew up in, I was born in. Like, people like my wife, who, always used to say, oh, I'm Indian. She's born and raised here. She's like, what are these people? I don't like them. My wife is like, oh, I'm with my white friends on this one. My wife is clear. She's like, what are these people doing? And it's happening. And luckily, Hindol, the good sign is that parties like the CPC that are the cuckoo ones when it comes to right-wing politics in Canada. The Conservatives are, you know what they are? They are Clinton Democrats. I don't know how conservative they are in Canada, really. So what has happened is a large chunk of the Canadian vote is going to the Conservatives, not to the CPC, Maxime Bernier's party. Now, somebody might come back and say, but Maxime Bernier is the only one who uses the Khalistan word and criticizes them. Well, Maxime Bernier says a lot of nonsensical things about brown people in general also. So I'm sorry, I will never support Maxime Bernier. So just because he hates Khalistanis, it doesn't mean he becomes my ally. But the Conservatives now are realizing, I don't know how many people saw this clip. It was a French interview of Pierre Poilievre, where this is the first time a Canadian Conservative has said, you cannot have 1.2 million immigrants every year and then have housing for only 200,000 of them. It is something our society cannot handle. We need to pause this. I have never heard a Canadian conservative say that, because it was the Quebecois who hated immigration. Do you remember in the history of Canada? It's
Of
the
course.
most anti-immigration people are the far left Quebecois of Canada.
That's
They
right.
hate immigration. So imagine how fast this society is changing. Luckily, they're all going to the Conservative Party, which is a very centrist political outfit.
Yeah.
Yes, they have these blind spots about not condemning the Khalistan issue completely. Just look at it now. The deputy leader of the Conservative Party, one of them is Tim Uppal. He openly tweets Khalistani things.
No, it's incredible. Talk to me a little bit about, you alluded to something a little while ago, Kushal, which caught my attention about how the education system was gamed. I think it's important for people to understand this, because this has been tried in many places, in England, in America. But I think one of the most successful examples of how this has been gamed is, in fact, Canada. Talk to us a little bit about what you've seen there.
So, when you have the prime minister saying you should not say mankind, you should say people kind, do I need to say more? And I mean, you name the woke terminology and Justin Trudeau will spew that. It used to be LGBTQ and then it's LGBTQ two spirit. I mean, I just can't keep up with this. Then you have, oh my God, I'm not going, because I know you are a very, you're very prim and proper, Hindol. So I don't wanna scar you, but
No, no.
there, okay, just Google key names. Jason Carothers is an Ontario spa owner. He was ordered to pay $35,000 Canadian dollars, okay, to a man pretending to be a woman because he said he couldn't accommodate waxing that person's male genitalia.
I
Okay?
don't know what to say to that.
Yes, this is Canada. This is what the university system has produced. You recently had the Toronto School Board District. It starts last year with the caste introduction, targeting the Hindu community. They're so good at targeting. They realize the Hindus are turning conservative. How do we scare them? Attack them on caste. Just this month, the TDSB is back. Now they realize we need to target the Jews. They get a Palestine legislation, which is basically normalizing anti-Semitism in the Toronto School Board District. This is the largest school board, along with Peel. Peel and Toronto, TDSB, are the largest school board districts of Canada. This is what is happening. You have seen Khalistani zombies. The Canadian university system creates white zombies.
That's right.
They have,
Quite right.
these are zombie making factories. The kind of moral relativism that has crept into Canadian society is just insane. I'll give you a story. This has actually happened to me. My wife's best friend, wonderful woman. She has a super sweet daughter. Every year we have this thing. We go out for dinner. We'll take them out for dinner to an Indian restaurant. My wife's best friend's daughter, she loves butter chicken. So we'll take her out. She's a 9-year-old, super cute girl. We're just having a discussion about how X demography is here, X demography is there. And the brown guy, made a statement, man, I see so many Indians. I just made a random comment. It was nothing. Yes.
Sure.
This girl gets up, goes and whispers something in her mommy's ears. Mother says, "You can say that, that's fine." Hindol, that broke my heart. That a 9-year-old white girl has been
Doesn't know
traumatized so much in the school system
that
that
she doesn't.
she is walking on eggshells in front of mommy's best friend, who happens to be a brown girl, and her husband. I, I don't care if you have a white child, black child, brown child. I don't want any child to walk on eggshells, which is why I oppose the caste legislation, because I don't want Hindu children to go through this caste identity thing. Why would you want them to go through this? Listen, this ideology is toxic. They have ruined a generation of, like, Hindol, why do you want an average white girl to think whether I can say this or not? Let them make mistakes. They will learn. Have some faith in the basic decency of the human being. But no, this is what this schooling system and university system, it's crept into the schools and all, is what I'm trying to scare you about. Forget the universities. ये तो 9 साल की बच्ची है मेरे भाई. She is thinking like this.
That's absolutely crazy. What you're basically saying, Kushal, is ek taraf to all these crazy things are happening in the schooling system. On the other side, people are essentially completely scamming the immigration system and joining colleges and universities that basically don't exist.
Yeah, they don't. Hindol, I studied in Canada in 2001 and 2. I took a proper 1-bedroom apartment that I shared with one person. That's the decent thing to do. The bedroom was used by that person, and I used to stay outside. I had my futon, मैं बाहर futon पे सोता था, and we would split the rent and the car park charges. In the same apartment today, I'm not making this up, you will have 6 to 10 students living. Yeah, is this what we are supposed to be normalizing in this country? What is it? What if I told you Brampton has rental rates per cot for 12 hours? I am not making this up. Per cot.
Per cot.
Manji.
Essentially
Just
per bed. Yeah.
yes. It's not even a bed. It's just
Yeah.
a cot.
Yeah. It's like yeah.
It's just a gadda. एक गद्दा 12 घंटे का हिंडोल. Yes, it has come down to this. It is. It's only in Brampton, though. Not even in Mississauga.
Tell me a little bit, let's talk a little bit about this housing problem. Of course, Canada, I mean, people don't realize that Canada has a lot of economic issues these days. It has always been, especially from the global south, countries like Canada have always been considered extremely wealthy. We used to laugh, I remember back in the day in journalism school. They don't know when a dog gets nudged, not even hit, nudged by a cyclist in Sweden, it makes headlines. We used to think about these countries in that light. Nothing bad happens there and so on and so forth. But today, of course, today's Canada is different. I mean, inflation is a problem, housing is a problem. Talk to us a little bit about the economic situation there. What's really going on? I mean, of course, immigration pressure is one thing you've mentioned, but the numbers that you're talking about, I mean, it's very difficult for cities. Canada is a large country, but if you don't build the kind of housing that's required, these pressures are unsustainable.
That's the problem. Last year, I remember Pierre giving an interview. He said the biggest problem that's crushing the real estate market is that the speed at which they give permits, right? Because left-wing politics, like, I believe climate change is real, but the solution to climate change is human innovation, not doomsday peddling. But the left in Canada, basically, left-wing politics in Canada is what if Greta Thunberg was deciding your policy. That is what is happening in Canada. So they have constrained the construction industry so much. The permits are so slow over here, Hindol. Then they should not have opened the students' market.
Yeah. So it's a mismatch. Yeah.
So it is a mismatch, right? So what they've done is they let all the students in, which is why I told you now the per bed rate for 12-hour shifts. Because where do these people go and stay? There is truly no place to stay. They're not going to sleep on the streets. So they just live in basements like 10, 12. You should not have more than 2 people, 3 people in a basement in a normal, humane place. It's a hazard, but no. They're just, I mean, their policies are so ridiculous of this government. They don't believe in fiscal conservatism. They have this new carbon tax that has come up, and that's hurting the Canadians even more. The carbon tax. They just, you name the woke talking point, and it will happen in Canada. There is another act. My biggest fear is that the Khalistanis and the Islamists, if they have their way, you know how we have ruined free speech in India, they will ruin it in Canada. How we have that Ghatia 295A law. My biggest fear is we will have blasphemy laws in Canada now in another 10 years if these people have their
It's
way.
not far away. The West will have blasphemy laws one of these days.
Read the Online Harms Act proposal that has been given in Canada. Hindol, it is a piece of work that online, it is called Bill C-63. It is literally called the Online Harms Act. Hindol, if you read that, you'll be like, ab ye hamare jaise ho rahe hain. Now they're understanding what we do in India. Hindol, people like you and I, we know we are not in jail is because the Indian state in its wisdom has decided not to jail us. Because there is a law on Indian books that can jail you and I any moment we want to. When they wanted to put Abhijit in, they put Abhijit in, someone who's so close to both you and I. We know what happens in India. They are doing this over here now. I don't know what they are planning. The Online Harms Act is a piece of work. It is perceived harms. It could, how do you define a harm? But it's coming. All these things are coming here.
But here's the interesting thing, like you're saying, when you push, and as Indians, we understand this, when you push something very far, there's always going to be a, counteraction, so to speak. And that counteraction, as we were discussing, I mean, the counteraction is what's happening in Europe today. We only have to look at Germany and Austria and Hungary and France and so on and so forth to see what that counteraction looks like. And I have no doubt that one day there will be blasphemy law in some part of the West, perhaps sotto voce, if not expressly termed. So this kind of legislation already exists. However, societal pushback is already coming in many, many places. I mean, if Trump wins again in America, all bets are off, right? I mean, who knows what's going to happen? But look, I mean, as we wrap up our conversation, I have 2 or 3 other questions for you, Kushal, if I may. One of this is the impact of all of this on students coming from the global south, especially from India, genuine students, not students who are wanting to enroll in a fake shop, right? Genuine students who want to travel to Canada, go to its top universities. How is this impacting those people? Because there's a considerable number of those people too.
Listen, I still believe there are some excellent universities in Canada.
There are, absolutely.
Waterloo. The one I used to go to was pretty decent. Also, York, University of Toronto. They have some excellent teachers there. There are many other. Western is there. Concordia is there also. There are many good schools in Canada. But listen, the cost of living over here has gone up so high that I think until and unless you're upper middle class in India, you just can't afford Canada anymore. It's Hindol, it's unbelievably expensive. यार तू मतलब यहाँ पे रहेगा यार, you're gonna give like $900, $1,000 as rent, just rent a month.
That's
Then you
insane.
have to travel. Then you need a lot of money to get educated, and then after that you will have Jagmeet Singh as your prime minister. So who's gonna come? So it's
That's
a serious
nicely
issue.
put. Yeah, that's nicely that's very nicely put. Talk to me about another constituency, Kushal, which you alluded to earlier, the Canadian Hindus. A lot of the ire is against Canadian Hindus also from this Khalistani group. How is this community always, again, like in America, so in Canada, always considered as sort of a model minority, studious, hardworking, well integrated? But of course, very individualistic, does not think in groups. How is this community changing? How is this community being impacted by what's happening on the Khalistan issue?
So, the Hindu community, like any community, is a mixed bag, right? You'll have all sorts of people in every community. Um, there, Hindu communities are the last in the history of North America who actually understood political activism is different from religious events. We for the longest time we only had Hindu American Foundation. There was no Hindu Canadian Foundation also. Canada में तो वो भी नहीं था. So HAF used to do it, and sometimes HAF would write a tweet about Canada. That's all, because that's how seriously Canada was taken. But then, obviously, since then, a lot of North American culture is very, what happens in America affects Canada and vice versa. So even it applies to the diaspora also. So whatever happens to American Hindus happens to Canadian Hindus and vice versa. And now you have many organizations that are actually understanding the value of, yes, you do the Diwali function, you do the Dashera function, you do the Vaisakhi function, you do Dandiya, you do Navratri, you do all of that. That's all the fun stuff. But there is life beyond that. Politics is very hardcore. And now you have multiple organizations. You have KONA, the Coalition of Hindus of North America. There are the Canadian Hindu Volunteers, and there are many, many, many such groups that are actually now trying to do something. It's a bit of hit and miss in every case. Another major problem is that because the Hindus are such nice immigrants, right? So the problem is, by the time they are second generation, third generation, a significant chunk of our own boys and girls are woke as hell. It's actually funny. I told one of my friends, they're like, why are Hindus woke? I said, listen, they're good migrants. They just became like you guys.
Yeah,
What do
no,
you want?
absolutely. I mean, it's like that young girl at the Harvard convocation,
Riddhi
right? You
Patel.
heard it, yeah. I mean, by the way, I'm going to tell our common friend Suhak Shukla that you complained that Hindu American Foundation wasn't tweeting enough about Canada.
They,
But
they they didn't, right? I don't blame them. It's a separate country. But I always tell Suhag, why is there no Hindu Canadian Foundation? Oh, it's too. Like, I was like, why, Suhag, why? And and they imagine being alone for so many years. At
yeah,
least now, because Kona is there, right? So, like, at least there is healthy competition between these guys, right? Like, Kona will do something, HAF will do something, and Kona has a Canadian chapter too, like a proper Canadian chapter. They have dedicated work. They do outreach to members of parliament and stuff like that. But but the disease of the Hindu society is not HAF and Kona. They're doing good work. I've always had a very empathetic and sympathetic view of them. What bothers the Indian discourse is what I call the uncle and auntification of the Hindu discourse.
that's very
The
funny. Explain that.
Okay, so when you live outside India, you have Indians who have come here since the 60s, 70s, 80s. They come with that uncle auntie mindset over here. And that uncle auntie mindset, when you become politically active, right? See, these people are rich. There are no two ways about it. Hindus are very rich here. Hindol, we are the richest community here by a country mile. I have seen that with
And
my own eyes.
and that is true in America, as you know. It's
Yeah.
the
Both in Canada.
1%, but the most
We have more
well-educated.
money than the Sikhs over here. People
Yeah,
don't
yeah,
understand.
it's true.
And you know what? Another thing that they don't understand, there are more Gujarati Hindus there are more Gujaratis than Punjabis here.
Correct.
Gujaratis just don't make a noise. They're like, okay, let us make money. We will make money. That's all they do. Even over here, they're making money. They're
No, it's
far more
absolutely
rich.
true. I mean, in America, it's the Gujaratis and the people from Andhra Pradesh and now Telangana,
Yeah. In
extremely well
Canada.
adjusted, extremely well integrated, extremely wealthy, extremely hardworking. It's
Yeah.
exactly the same groups. Yeah,
Yeah. Punjabis have money, but you can't compare it. So
that's right.
over here, what these uncles and aunties do is, right, Hindol, they have money. So they will donate 50,000 Canadian dollars to some cause, for a temple cause. Now, अब मैंने पैसा दिया है, अब सब चीज मेरे हिसाब से होगी. ओ माफ कर दे यार, ओ माफ कर दे तू. Because now they have suddenly become political also, because politics is now the new religion and the flavor of the society. So everybody plays politics. So even the uncles and aunties are doing, and they are so bad at it that it's unbelievably embarrassing. And like, I remember I'm not going to take the name of the member of parliament. A member of parliament says, our Hindu community speaks very well for 4 minutes. And then in the 5th minute, the uncle and auntie has come out. And it's so problematic over here
I
that
understand what you're saying. This is the problem actually not so much in America, but certainly this is exactly the problem in England. I mean, this is
it's
again, I'm not going
Canada
to
is
name
similar
any.
to England in that sense, not
Yeah,
so much to America.
yeah,
Canada is similar to England in that sense. So this uncle auntie syndrome is very dangerous. And another problem I have with our community is, while the second and third generation become ultra woke and they don't consume anything in their native culture, the first generation, especially the uncles and aunties, do not consume anything native to the land they're living in. So they don't watch the CBC, they'll not read the Toronto Star or the National Post. They are watching Indian YouTube full time. That's their job. They have that box with all Indian channels and they are living India sitting here.
sitting in
I'm like,
Canada.
फिर
Yeah,
यहाँ क्यों आया यार, वहीं जाना.
correct.
So this is and the biggest thing that I come over here is because I'm kind of a mildly anglicized Indian, right? So
Sure.
I can hang out with the white guy, I can hang out with the brown guy, both. So
Yeah,
the biggest complaint I get from brown people is, can you talk to our kids? I was like, so what are you doing then?
yeah.
That's the single biggest request I get. Can you talk to our kids? The gulf between the first and second generation
It's
Hindus
huge.
is rising. The
No,
second
this is
generation
exactly the
kids are
problem
like,
in America.
who are my parents?
No, this is exactly the same problem in America. And this is exactly why we are losing, really, we're losing hundreds and thousands of young people who have no context and they're taking a completely different route. All of the things you're saying, Kushal, we are laughing a little bit about this, but these are all very serious issues when you start to discuss them in the context of politics and political mobilization. So let me conclude by asking you one last question. There's a big election coming up in Canada. Do you foresee that the political mobilization and counter revolution, so to speak, that you're talking about, do you already see having a major impact in the upcoming election, or is it sometime ahead in the future?
No, I think this will be the first election where a giant chunk of the Hindu community is going to vote conservative for the first time in their life. They've never done that. So you remember what happened in the Tories of England ka election? The
That's
Hindus
right.
just went to the Tories. They got fed up of the Labour Party. They're like, oh my God, these guys are too anti-Hindu and too radical. We're going conservative. And that's exactly what is happening to the Hindu community over here. They're turned, like, I don't even have to tell people, right? Now I go to Hindus, they're like, I'm conservative. I'm like, whoa, when did this happen? Like, and not one or two, like I meet hundreds of people here, right? Because I go to talks, events, and there are
And they
different
would
people
also
that
be
meet me.
therefore carrying their wallets with them, so to speak. I mean,
It's going to happen. And it's for the Conservative Party to be intelligent. The wallets will come when the Conservative Party starts talking about Khalistan openly.
right.
The day the Conservative Party starts talking about Khalistan, they will be flooded with money. I can guarantee you that.
There you are. On that note, Kushal, thank you very much. As I said in the beginning of our conversation, you have a unique perspective because you spent part of your year in India and part of your year in Canada, and you've been doing it for many, many years. So you really have an insider-outsider perspective that's very, very valuable and enriching. You mentioned Terry Malofsky's book on the Khalistan issue. I had a chance to talk to Terry about his work. In spite of such incredible work, it's really sad and terrifying the direction in which the Khalistanis have been able to take this matter. But like you say, a change is coming and change is afoot. Thanks very much, Kushal, for your time. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Hindol. Thanks a lot for having me over. And just on one somber note, Terry's book did not find a publisher in Canada. He had to publish it via Indian publisher. I'll leave everyone on that depressing note.
That's a wonderful and a very insightful and a stark note to leave this conversation. It's really one of the most brilliant books, Terry Malofsky, the Canadian journalist, book on Khalistan. If you haven't read it, please read it. I have read it. So has Kushal. So have many, many people. It's one of the most brilliant, concise, insightful, to the point, doesn't take random side, doesn't talk about random things. It's a very objective journalistic work. You will really enjoy it on the Khalistan issue. And of course, Kushal Mehra, thanks very much once again.
Thanks, buddy.